When Caleb Rowan walked into the cafe that cold March evening, he had no idea his life was about to change forever. He was expecting an awkward dinner, maybe some forced small talk. What he wasn't expecting was to watch a woman break down in tears the moment she saw his face. Before we dive into this story, let us know in the comment section where in the world you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Caleb was 34, a mountain rescue paramedic in Boulder, Colorado. Strong hands, tired eyes, the kind of man who spent his days pulling strangers off cliffs and his nights sitting alone in the dark after his son fell asleep. His wife, Ari, had been dead for 4 years. 4 years of frozen dinners, 4 years of sleeping on his side of the bed like she might come back. 4 years of watching his 8-year-old son Milo wake up screaming from nightmares about the day his mother collapsed in their kitchen and never got back up. Caleb didn't date. He didn't have time. He didn't have the energy. And honestly, he didn't have the heart. But his sister Jenna wouldn't let it go. "You need a life outside grief," she'd told him last week, sliding a napkin across her kitchen table with a name and time written on it. "Her name's Elara. She's kind. She's brilliant. She's funny. Just meet her once." "I have a life," Caleb had said. "You have a schedule. That's not the same thing." So here he was, Willow and Stone Cafe, 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, snow melting on the windows, his leg bouncing under the table like he was waiting for bad news. He checked his phone, checked the door, checked his phone again. Maybe she wouldn't show. Maybe he could text Jenna and say he tried. Maybe he could be home in time to read Milo his bedtime story and pretend this whole thing never happened. The door opened. A woman entered in a powered wheelchair. She had copper hair braided loosely, over one shoulder, soft grey eyes that scanned the room like she was looking for an exit. She moved with control, but there was something guarded about her, something braced. Caleb watched her navigate between tables, watched people glance up and then quickly look away, the way people do when they don't want to be caught staring. She spotted him and froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Her eyes locked onto his, searching, calculating, and then something in her face crumbled. She started shaking her head, slowly at first, then faster. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Caleb stood up. "Hey, are you okay?" She was backing up now, gripping her wheels. Her breathing went ragged. People at nearby tables turned to look. "I can't," she said, her voice cracking. "I can't do this again." Caleb took a step toward her. "Do what? What's wrong?" "You weren't supposed to be..." She couldn't finish. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Just go. Please, please, just go before this gets worse." She was crying, in the middle of a crowded cafe, begging a stranger to leave her alone. Every instinct Caleb had, every hour of training, every rescue, every moment of holding someone through the worst day of their life kicked in at once. He didn't run. He didn't look away. He walked toward her slowly, carefully, and knelt down until his eyes were level with hers. "Hey," he said softly. "I'm Caleb. Can I sit with you? Only if you want." She stared at him like he'd spoken another language. "You're not leaving?" she whispered. "Do you want me to?" A long pause. Her hands trembled on her wheels. "I don't know," she admitted. "Then let's figure it out together." He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, just stayed there, kneeling on the cafe floor, while the woman in front of him tried to remember how to breathe. Her name was Elara Quinn. She was 29, and she had been lied to. "They told me you used a wheelchair too," she finally said, her voice hollow. "They said you'd understand, that you wouldn't look at me like this." Caleb blinked. "Who told you that?" "The person who set this up. They said we'd have that in common." Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Elara, my sister set this up. She never mentioned anything about a wheelchair. She just told me you were extraordinary." Elara laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Extraordinary, right? I'm serious. She said you were kind and funny and worth meeting. That's it." Elara wiped her face with the back of her hand. "So, you didn't know?" "No. And you're not going to suddenly remember you left the stove on?" "My stove is fine." She studied him for a long moment, searching for the lie, waiting for the disappointment to show. But Caleb just waited, patient, steady, like he had all the time in the world. I've done this before, Ilara said quietly. The blind date thing. It always ends the same way. They either treat me like a charity case, or they can't get out fast enough. I thought maybe this time would be different, because they said you'd understand. She shook her head. I should have known better. Caleb sat back on his heels. Can I tell you something? What? I've been set up on dates by people who want to fix me too. People who think grief has an expiration date. People who look at my son and see a problem instead of a kid. He paused. I know what it feels like to be managed by people who love you but don't actually see you. Ilara's eyes softened. Just a fraction. I'm not here out of pity, Caleb said. I'm here because Jenna said you were worth meeting. And so far, she's not wrong. The cafe hummed around them. Silverware clinked. Someone laughed at the bar. Ilara took a shaky breath. Then sit, she whispered. Please. And he did. They ordered coffee, then tea, then more coffee. The cafe emptied around them. Chairs got stacked on tables. The barista wiped down the counter twice. Neither of them noticed. Ilara told him everything. She'd been a competitive alpine skier, national level, the kind of athlete who woke up at 4 in the morning and lived for the sound of her skis cutting through fresh powder. At 24, she was on track for the Olympics. Then a car ran a red light. She woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed, couldn't feel her legs, couldn't feel anything below her waist. The doctors used words like permanent and spinal cord and adjustment period, but all Ilara heard was silence, the silence of a future that no longer existed. My boyfriend stayed for 2 months, she said, staring into her cup. 63 days, I counted. Then one morning he sat on the edge of my bed and told me he'd lost the woman he loved. She laughed bitterly. Like I died in that accident and forgot to stop breathing. Caleb didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty comfort. He just listened. I wanted to give up, Ilara continued. For a long time I did. But then I got angry, and the anger got me into rehab, got me into a wheelchair I could actually control, got me back to designing equipment for other athletes like me. She finally looked up. I rebuilt my whole life, Caleb, from nothing, and I'm proud of that. But dating, she shook her head, dating is a nightmare. How so? Some men treat me like a project, like if they're patient enough, I'll magically start walking again, and they'll get credit for fixing me. Others can't see past the chair at all. And then there are the ones who fetishize it. Like my disability makes me exotic. She shuddered. I can't survive being someone's charity case again. I won't. The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Caleb took a breath. Can I tell you about Ari? Ilara nodded. She was healthy, strong, the kind of person who ran marathons for fun and complained that I couldn't keep up. He smiled faintly at the memory. Then one afternoon, she was making lunch, and Milo was doing homework at the kitchen table. She said she felt dizzy, and then she was, on the floor. His voice stayed steady, but his hands didn't. Milo saw everything. He was 4. He watched me try to save her and fail. By the time the ambulance came, she was gone. Rare heart condition nobody knew about. He paused. Milo still has nightmares, still wakes up screaming for her, and I can't fix it. I can't bring her back. All I can do is show up every single day and try to make him feel safe. Ilara reached across the table. Her fingers brushed his. I haven't dated since she died, Caleb admitted. Not because I don't get lonely. I do. But Milo comes first. He always comes first. And I refuse to bring someone into his life who isn't going to stay. So, why are you here tonight? Caleb looked at her. Really looked. Because my sister told me I was disappearing. And I think she's right. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 people who understood what it meant to lose everything and keep going anyway. Same time next week? Ilara asked. Caleb smiled. I'd like that. What followed was 3 months Caleb never expected. They went to an adaptive climbing gym where Ilara taught him how to belay safely and laughed when he struggled with the harness. They watched movies with captions on, whispering commentary to each other like teenagers. Caleb learned how to ask before helping with transfers, how to position his truck so she could get in easier, how to see her instead of her chair. And Ilara met Milo. She was nervous that first day. Caleb could tell by the way she kept adjusting her braid, but Milo walked right up to her and asked the question every adult was too polite to say out loud. How come your legs don't work? Caleb opened his mouth to apologize, but Ilara just smiled. "I was in an accident," she said simply. "My spine got hurt, and now my brain can't talk to my legs anymore." Milo thought about this. "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes, but I've gotten pretty good at dealing with it." "Can you do wheelies?" Ilara grinned. "Want to see?" By the end of that afternoon, Milo had taught her his favorite card game, and Ilara had taught him a breathing trick she'd learned in rehab. Something to do when the panic came. Something to hold on to when the nightmares got too loud. That night, Milo slept through until morning for the first time in months. Caleb stood in the doorway of his son's room, watching him breathe, and felt something crack open in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 4 years. Jenna noticed too. "She's good for you," she whispered at a family dinner, watching Ilara laugh at something Milo said. "And she's good for him." Caleb didn't argue, but Ilara was still afraid. He saw it in the way she hesitated before holding his hand in public, the way she flinched when strangers stared, the way she always seemed to be waiting for him to realize he'd made a mistake. 3 months in, Caleb took her to the Adaptive Sports Rehabilitation Center, the place where she'd learned to live again. They sat in a quiet therapy room, sunlight streaming through the windows, and Ilara finally broke. "I'm falling in love with you," she whispered, tears sliding down her face. "And it terrifies me." Caleb reached for her hand. "I can't be someone's project," she continued, her voice shaking. "I can't be the thing you fix to feel good about yourself. And I can't," she choked on the words, "I can't survive being left again." She looked at him with everything she had. "If you're not sure, tell me now. I'll understand. But don't stay for the wrong reasons, Caleb. Please." The room went silent. Caleb took her face in his hands. "Ilara, you are not an obligation. You're not something to fix. You're not a replacement for what I lost." His voice broke. "You're a miracle I never expected." She started to cry harder. "Milo sleeps through the night now because of you. I laugh again because of you. I feel alive for the first time in 4 years because of you." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm not staying out of pity. I'm staying because my life is better with you in it." She collapsed into his arms, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. 9 months after that disastrous blind date, Caleb drove Ilara up a winding mountain road she didn't recognize. "Where are we going?" she asked, for the 3rd time. "You'll see. I hate surprises." "I know." The road opened into a meadow, wildflowers everywhere, purple and gold and white, swaying in the summer breeze. Beyond them, Boulder Canyon stretched out like a painting, the sun sinking low and turning the sky into fire. Ilara's breath caught. "Caleb, what is this?" He parked the truck and came around to help her into her chair. His hands were shaking. She noticed but didn't say anything. He pushed her to the edge of the meadow, where the flowers met the overlook. The whole world spread out beneath them. Then he walked around to face her and knelt. Ilara's hand flew to her mouth. "Caleb, wait," he said, his voice unsteady. "Let me get this out before I forget how to breathe." He took her hands in his, looked up at her with tears already forming. 9 months ago, I walked into a cafe expecting nothing. I was tired. I was broken. I was only there because my sister wouldn't leave me alone. He laughed softly. "And then, you rolled in and fell apart in front of me. And something in my chest woke up for the first time in 4 years. Ilara was already crying. "You're not a project to me, Ilara. You're not a cause. You're not something I'm settling for." His voice cracked. "You're the bravest person I've ever met. You rebuilt your entire life from the ground up. You taught my son how to breathe through his fear. You taught me how to hope again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm not asking you to complete me. I'm not asking you to fix what's broken. I'm asking you to build something new. With me, with Milo, a family, a future, all of it." He opened the box. A simple diamond ring caught the dying sunlight. "Ilara Quinn, will you marry me?" She couldn't speak. Her whole body trembled. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded frantically. "Yes," she finally choked out. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. She pulled him up and into her arms, holding him so tight he could barely breathe. They stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, crying and laughing at the same time. And then a small voice shattered the moment. Did she say yes? They both turned. Milo came sprinting out from behind a pine tree at the edge of the meadow, his face split into the biggest grin Caleb had ever seen. Did she say yes? Elara laughed through her tears. Yes, buddy, I said yes. Milo pumped his fist in the air. I knew it. Dad, I told you she'd say yes. I practiced my happy dance and everything. And then he started dancing, right there in the wildflowers, the most ridiculous, joyful 8-year-old dance anyone had ever seen. Elara laughed, so hard she couldn't breathe. Caleb pulled Milo into the hug, and the three of them held on like they'd never let go. The wedding was small, just the way they wanted it. A sunlit greenhouse on the outskirts of Boulder, plants everywhere, warm light filtering through glass walls, soft music, 30 guests who actually mattered. Jenna cried before the ceremony even started. Caleb's mother kept dabbing her eyes with a tissue she'd brought specifically for this purpose. Even the officiant got a little choked up. But the moment that broke, everyone was Milo. He walked Elara down the aisle, not pushed her, walked beside her, his small hand resting on the arm of her wheelchair, guiding her forward like he'd done it 1,000 times. When they reached Caleb, Milo looked up at Elara and whispered loud enough for the front row to hear, I told you he'd stay. Elara had to take a full minute before she could speak her vows. I spent 5 years believing I was too broken to be loved, she said, her voice trembling, that my chair made me less, that anyone who stayed was settling. And then I met you. She looked at Caleb. You didn't see a wheelchair. You saw me. The real me. The scared, stubborn, hopeful me. And you stayed anyway. She squeezed his hands. Thank you for staying when leaving was easier. Caleb wiped his eyes, took a breath, and gave his vows. 4 years ago, I stopped living. I went through the motions. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I told myself I was being strong for Milo, but the truth is, I was hiding. From grief, from hope, from the terrifying possibility that I might feel something again. He reached up and touched her face. You didn't just wake me up, Elara. You brought me back to life. You gave my son someone to believe in. You gave me a reason to believe the best days aren't behind us. He smiled through tears. You're my future. Both of you are. The greenhouse erupted. Applause, tears, Milo whooping like his team had just won the championship. Caleb kissed his wife for the first time. And somewhere in the back row, Jenna whispered to her husband, I told you that blind date would work. Later that night, after the dancing and the cake and the endless congratulations, the three of them sat together on a bench outside the greenhouse. Milo had fallen asleep on Elara's lap, his hand curled around hers, his breathing slow and peaceful. Caleb had his arm around both of them. The stars were just starting to come out. Hey, Elara said softly. Hey. She touched his cheek. Thank you. For what? For sitting down. Caleb smiled. Best decision I ever made. She leaned into him. Milo stirred, but didn't wake. And in that moment, surrounded by silence and starlight and the two people who had saved him, Caleb finally understood what his sister had been trying to tell him all along. Grief doesn't have an expiration date, but neither does hope. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to Soul Story so you never miss another video. Drop a comment and let us know what part moved you most. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Because sometimes, the best love stories start with the worst first impressions. See you in the next one.